We've been hiding for 47 days, the weary and sad widow whispered softly, but with a shaking tone. The rancher took pity on her and gave her food, a shelter, and his heart stopped everything. I need to know something first. Is it raining where you are? Snowing in Oslo? Sweltering in Sao Paulo? Are you safe in Brooklyn or restless in Bangkok at 3 a.m.? Remember your answer, because what happened in this godforsaken stretch of earth makes your world seem like paradise. This was a place where kindness was hunted to extinction, where the sun killed as surely as any bullet, and where survival meant trusting a stranger with everything you had left. Arizona Territory, June 1872. The desert had no mercy that summer. Heat rose from cracked earth in waves that blurred the horizon, turning distant mesas into shimmering ghosts. The stagecoach road between Prescott and Phoenix was little more than hardpan and rattlesnake tracks, baking under a sun that felt like God's own anvil. Beneath an overhang of red rock, pressed against stone still cool from the night before, Elena Vaughn held her 7-year-old son close. Daniel's lips were cracked white, his breathing shallow, his small frame trembling despite the heat. She had given him the last of the water 2 hours ago, 3 sips from a canteen now lighter than hope. Elena's own throat felt like sandpaper. She couldn't remember the taste of food. The dried apples were gone 4 days back. The hardtack, 6. Arizona was supposed to be their salvation, but all it had given them was endless sky and the certainty that they were being hunted. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow, deliberate, coming from the north. Her heart seized. She pulled Daniel deeper into shadow, one hand wrapping around a jagged piece of shale. Bounty hunter. Outlaw. Worse. Him. A rider appeared through the heat shimmer, tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, wearing a duster the color of dust and a hat pulled low against the glare. 2 horses trailed behind him, loaded with gear. He saw the overhang and reined in gently. The man dismounted. Boots hit dirt with purpose. As he approached, Elena raised the stone, arm shaking. He stopped 10 feet away and lifted both hands. Easy now, just passing through. His voice was rough but not unkind. He had a weathered face, maybe 40, with gray threading through dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. "Ma'am," he said carefully. "You hurt?" Elena opened her mouth, but nothing came. Her vision blurred at the edges. She tried again, voice barely audible. "We've been hiding for 47 days. The man stood perfectly still. Then he reached slowly into his saddlebag and pulled out a wrapped bundle. He unwrapped it with care. Strips of dried venison, dark and salted. He knelt and held it out with both hands. "It's tough," he said, "but it'll keep you breathing." Elena stared at the food like it might vanish. Then she took it with trembling fingers and pressed a piece into Daniel's hand. The boy began to chew, eyes filling with tears. The stranger stood back watching. "Name's Cade Merrick," he said. "I've got a place 20 miles south. Adobe house, deep well, shade trees. Not much else, but the walls are thick and the door locks from inside." Elena looked up, lips parted. Cade met her gaze without flinching. "I can rig a travois for the boy, but right now, you both need water and rest." Elena glanced down at Daniel, now leaning against her, chewing slowly, then back at the man. "I don't know you," she whispered. "Name's Cade Merrick," he repeated, "and you don't need to know more unless you want to." He extended his hand. "There's safety at my place if you trust it." Elena stared at his hand, calloused, scarred, steady. Then slowly she reached out her own. "I trust it," she said quietly. Cade gave a single nod. "Then let's get you home." The desert stretched endless in every direction, broken only by saguaro sentinels and clusters of cholla that caught the dying light. Cade's ranch sat in a shallow basin, protected by low hills and a line of cottonwoods that somehow thrived near an underground spring. It wasn't grand, just a flat-roofed adobe structure with thick walls and narrow windows, a stable built from weathered timber, and a corral holding 3 Mustangs and a mule. But after 47 days of running, it looked like a fortress. Cade helped Elena down from the travois he'd fashioned, then lifted Daniel with surprising gentleness. The boy barely stirred. "Water's inside," Cade said. "Pump works. I'll see to the horses." Elena hesitated, scanning the perimeter. The hills, the brush, the empty sky. Her fingers tightened on Daniel's shoulder. Then she stepped through the door. Inside smelled of sage, leather, and something faintly metallic. Gun oil, maybe. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a simple wooden table sat near the center. There was one bed against the far wall, neatly made. No clutter, no wasted space. Cade came in behind her, removing his hat. "You can have the bed. I'll take the stable tonight." "That's not," she started. "It's not about fair," he interrupted gently. "It's about need. You need it more." Elena nodded slowly. She led Daniel to the bed but laid out her own shawl on the floor beside it, making a thin pallet. She rolled up her coat for a pillow, then pulled the boy close. Cade watched for a moment, then crossed to a trunk and pulled out 2 heavy wool blankets. "Lost my mother when I was 8, he said quietly, placing them near her. "Cholera took her before the doctor arrived. I remember the fear, not just of death, but of being alone in it." He touched his chest once, then turned away. Elena didn't answer, but she drew the blankets over Daniel, tucking them carefully around his shoulders. Later that night, Cade sat on the porch step, cleaning his rifle by moonlight. He could hear Daniel's labored breathing through the window, thin and ragged, like wind through torn canvas. He stood, walked to the stable, and returned with an old shirt from his gear. He sat at the table with a needle and thread stripped from saddle leather and began to stitch by lamplight. His fingers were built for triggers, not needlework. He pricked himself twice. The seam was crooked, the stitches uneven, but when he finished, the tear in Daniel's sleeve was closed. The next morning, Elena found the mended shirt folded at the foot of the bed. She touched it gently, running her fingers along the awkward stitching. Her breath caught. When Cade came in from watering the stock, she was standing by the pump, a tin cup in her hands. "Thank you," she said softly. He just nodded, setting down a basket of eggs. "Needed doing." She watched him for a long moment, something fragile and uncertain flickering behind her eyes. Then, for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. Small, hesitant, but real. Cade caught it from the corner of his eye, then turned to stoke the fire. Elena said nothing about her past. Not yet. Not about Colorado. Not about what, or who, chased her across 3 territories. But that night, when Daniel fell asleep without waking once, Elena looked at the ceiling beams and whispered to no one, "Maybe we can breathe, just for a little while." The days grew longer. Summer deepened its hold on the desert, but Cade's well ran cold and pure. Mornings still held a hint of coolness, and by afternoon the adobe walls kept the worst heat at bay. Cade began taking Daniel to the stable after breakfast. At first the boy clung to his mother's skirt, intimidated by the horse's size and the sharp smell of hay and manure. But Cade was patient. He crouched beside Daniel with grain in his palm. "Let her come to you," he said gently. "Just hold steady." Daniel looked to his mother for permission. "It's all right, sweetheart," Elena said. "You can try." Daniel hesitated, then stretched out his hand. The bay mare sniffed his palm and lipped the grain carefully. Daniel's face lit up with wonder. Cade smiled faintly. "Braver than most grown men I know." From then on, Daniel followed him each morning, scattering feed, brushing coats, learning to move slowly and speak softly. Cade showed him how to check hooves, how to bridle without spooking, how to earn trust instead of demanding it. Elena often watched from the doorway. Daniel's laughter, so rare since Colorado, returned in pieces. Inside, Elena began to settle. She cooked meals from what little they had: beans, cornmeal, dried chilies. She swept floors, washed clothes, hung them to dry on a line between 2 posts. One afternoon, she found a ledger on the table. Columns of numbers, some crossed out, others smudged. "I used to keep books for a mining office," she said carefully. "If you don't mind, I could help straighten these." Cade looked surprised. "You did accounts?" She nodded, flipping through pages. "My husband wasn't good with figures." After a moment, Cade handed her a pencil. When he returned later, the pages were neat, tallied, balanced. A note in the margin read, "Your hay supplier is overcharging by 12%. He chuckled quietly. "Remind me not to cross you in business." Elena looked up, pride and something heavier behind her eyes. A woman who had known order and lost it. Cade saw it. They didn't speak of it. That same week, Daniel wandered too close to the black gelding, ill-tempered and unbroken. He carried a bucket, mimicking Cade's chores. "Careful, Daniel," Elena called, but too late. The horse snorted, reared, hooves flashing. "Move," Cade shouted, throwing himself between them. The hoof struck his ribs and sent him sprawling into the dirt. He hit hard, breath knocked clean out. Daniel screamed. Elena ran. By the time she reached them, Cade was upright, one arm pressed to his side, dust clinging to his shirt. "Are you hurt?" Elena asked, voice shaking. He winced. "Not bad." He missed the important parts. Elena helped him to the house, sat him near the fire, and peeled back his shirt. A bruise was already blooming, deep purple and angry. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, dampening a cloth. "He's just a little boy." "So was I," Cade said quietly. She cleaned the wound carefully, her hands gentle but her breath uneven. "You could have been killed." Cade met her eyes. So could he. They sat in silence, the fire crackling beside them. Her hand paused on his skin, then moved again. Slower now, more deliberate. She lifted her eyes to his. Neither looked away. The air between them felt charged, fragile. Gray spoke first, a whisper. "Thank you." Cade nodded once. "Anytime." That night, Daniel slept curled against his mother, safe and still. Elena lingered by the fire longer than usual, her eyes drifting now and then to the closed door behind which Cade rested, his ribs bruised, his heart steady. Daniel sat cross-legged on the porch, his wooden soldiers lined up on a flat stone. He moved them with solemn purpose, muttering softly, unaware that Cade was just around the corner mending a broken fence rail. "Now you be quiet," Daniel told one of the soldiers, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If you say Uncle Victor's name again, he'll come find us." Cade's hands stilled. Daniel continued, voice thinner now. "Mama said not to talk about the bad uncle. But he's mean. He hurt Mama and broke the dishes, I saw." The hammer slipped from Cade's grip and hit the ground with a dull thud. Daniel startled and looked up, eyes wide. Cade stepped onto the porch slowly, kneeling beside him. "Daniel," he said gently, "what did you say about Victor?" The boy froze, then turned his face away. "Nothing." Cade looked toward the door where Elena had just stepped out with a basket of mending. Her eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, something shifted. She set the basket down and walked over, crouching beside her son. "Go inside, Daniel. Wash your hands for supper." Daniel glanced between them, then slipped through the door. Elena stayed still for a breath, her jaw tight. "So," Cade said quietly, "Victor's not just a name from Colorado, is he?" Elena sat back on her heels, shoulders low with exhaustion. "No," she admitted. "He's not." Cade waited, not pressing. "My husband Thomas died 3 years ago. Mine collapsed, crushed in a tunnel that shouldn't have been worked. Or so they said." She looked off toward the hills, eyes dark. "Thomas left the claim to Daniel, not to me. Not even to his brother. Just Daniel." She swallowed hard. "When Thomas died, Victor saw an opportunity. He tried to claim guardianship. Said I was unstable, that I couldn't provide." Cade's eyes narrowed. "And he had proof?" Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Proof? No. Just influence. He drank with the judge, sat in the front pew every Sunday, wore pressed suits." Cade said nothing. Elena's voice lowered. "One night I woke up and found him in Daniel's room. He said he came to check on the boy. I told him to leave. He didn't." Her fingers dug into the fabric of her skirt. "I locked Daniel in the root cellar and held a kitchen knife to Victor's throat. He laughed. Said nobody would believe me, that the claim was his by right." She looked at Cade then, her eyes not asking for pity, just the space to breathe. "I waited until he passed out drunk, packed what I could carry, and we ran. No plan. Just away." Cade nodded slowly. He didn't ask more, didn't offer hollow comfort. That night, after Daniel was asleep and the fire had gone low, Cade opened the old trunk beneath his bed. Inside lay a Colt revolver wrapped in oilcloth, untouched since the war. He sat at the table, lit a lamp, and cleaned it in silence. Then he loaded 6 bullets, one by one, and set it beneath his coat. No words passed between him and Elena as she moved past to fetch water, but she paused at the doorway. "I didn't expect kindness out here," she said softly. "Not after what we ran from." Cade kept his eyes on the lamp's flame. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. She hesitated. "No, but I want to earn what you've given." He looked up at her, the light catching something quiet and unspoken between them. Outside, the wind picked up again, but inside, the adobe walls held steady. The days grew longer still, and the desert softened. In the mornings, dew clung to the yucca like diamonds, and by noon the cottonwoods offered blessed shade. Cade spent most daylight hours repairing Elena's wagon. the one they'd abandoned miles back, now dragged to his ranch by mule. He worked slow and careful, like a man not just rebuilding wood and iron, but weighing something heavier in his chest. One afternoon, as he wiped sweat from his brow, Elena came out with a tin cup of cool water. She handed it to him without a word and sat on the porch step. For a moment, they both watched Daniel chase a lizard around the edge of the corral, his laughter light and free. Cade drank, then set the cup down. "You know," he said, "I'm not trying to keep you here." Elena turned to him, eyes shaded under her bonnet. "I never thought you were." He nodded. "Still, if you need to leave, I'll help you get wherever you're going. But if you need a place to get steady again, this land holds. Might not be rich, might not be fancy, but it'll hold your feet." Elena looked away for a moment, her throat working around emotions she couldn't name. "I never had a man offer me ground," she said quietly. "Only reasons to run." Cade didn't reply, but something quiet passed between them, rooted and slow-growing. After that, Elena changed. She still rose early, still swept and boiled water and mended clothes. But now she hummed while washing Daniel's hair. She started gathering wildflowers and putting them in jars on the table. Her smiles came easier. Sometimes she laughed, soft and sudden, like she'd forgotten how. Royce noticed, and though he never spoke it aloud, he responded in kind. One evening, after finishing repairs on the stable door, he disappeared for an hour. Elena thought nothing of it, but the next morning, when Daniel stepped onto the porch, he gasped. A rope swing hung from the cottonwood beam, crafted from worn hemp and smooth wood, just the right size. Daniel touched it with reverence, then looked back at his mother with shining eyes. "Did you make this, Mama?" Elena shook her head. "No, sweetheart, that was Mr. Cade." Daniel ran to the swing and climbed on, kicking his feet with delight. From inside the stable, Cade watched without stepping forward, but he heard the laughter, and he let himself smile. That night, supper was simple. Beans, cornbread, a jar of peach preserves Elena had bartered for with a neighbor. They sat quietly at the table, Daniel nestled in Cade's old coat beside the fire, dozing. Elena sipped from her tin cup and glanced at him. "You don't talk much." "I talk when needed." She smiled faintly. "Then let me do the talking." He tilted his head. "All right." She took a breath. "If I were braver, I'd tell you that this place feels more like home than anywhere I've been." He looked at her steadily. "You don't need to be brave to say that." "No," she whispered. "No, I don't." They lapsed into silence. The fire snapped and hissed between them. From the bedroll, Daniel stirred. In a sleepy, slurred whisper, he mumbled, "Night, Papa." Elena froze. Cade looked up. The word hung in the air like a prayer spoken too soon. Daniel didn't wake. He rolled over and tucked his hand beneath his cheek, breathing deep. Elena's eyes met Cade's across the dim room. Neither spoke. Neither dared. But they didn't look away. There was no correction, no apology, no explanation. Only a look, long and quiet, that carried something like a promise. Unnamed but undeniable, outside the swing, creaked gently in the wind. Dust rose on the southern road like smoke from a distant fire. Cade had just finished shoeing one of the Mustangs when he saw the lone rider cutting across the flats, heading straight for the ranch with purpose in every stride. The man rode a dappled gray stallion, fast and expensive, and wore a tailored coat that shimmered with trail dust. By the time he reached the fence line, Elena was already standing on the porch, Daniel behind her skirts, clutching tightly. Her face had gone pale. The blood drained from her cheeks as she stared at the man approaching. "Victor," she breathed. Cade stepped out of the stable, horseshoe rasp still in hand. The rider dismounted with practiced ease and tied off his reins to the post. He walked with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, smirking like he already owned the place. Pinned to his vest was a silver badge, court-appointed guardian of Minor Ward. "Well now," Victor drawled, "quite the little hideaway you've made for yourself, sister-in-law. And here I was, worried you and the boy had died in some arroyo." Elena didn't answer, her jaw locked tight. Victor turned toward Cade. "Name's Victor Vaughn. I'm here for the boy." Cade narrowed his eyes. "You're what?" "He's my legal responsibility," Victor said, patting the badge like it was gospel. "His father's claim, what's left of it, belongs to him, which means I manage it. And him," he glanced at Elena with a sneer, including his unfit mother. Cade stepped slowly onto the porch, placing himself between Victor and the door. "You won't be taking anything from here," he said evenly. Victor scoffed. "You planning to stop me?" Elena stepped forward. "You have no right." Victor cut her off. "No right? I have the damn court on my side, woman. You kidnapped a minor and fled the territory. I could have you locked up in Prescott before sundown." Daniel whimpered behind Elena's dress. Cade set the rasp down on the porch railing with deliberate slowness. "I'm going to ask you once," he said, voice hard and flat. "Turn your horse around. Get off my land." Victor's eyes glittered. "Or what, cowboy?" Cade took a step closer. The porch boards creaked beneath his boots. "Or I forget you were ever here." Tension cracked between them like heat lightning. Victor reached back, hand brushing the butt of his holstered revolver. Before he could draw, 3 more riders came over the rise. Neighbors Cade had helped through drought, ranchers from the valley. One of them, old Samuel Ortiz, called out, "Merrick, that man giving you trouble?" Victor's eyes darted to the newcomers. He hesitated. Cade never looked away. "Daniel and his mother are under my roof. My name's Cade Merrick. We were married last week in front of 2 witnesses and a traveling preacher. You got a badge? I got a wife and son." Victor's hand froze. The other ranchers rode in closer now, silent but watchful. One of them unfastened his rifle from the saddle. Victor licked his lips. "There's no certificate." "There's my word," Cade said, "and in these parts, that counts more." The silence held. Then Victor spat into the dust. "This ain't over," he hissed. "I'll be back with the law. Paper, ink, and iron." He turned, mounted his horse in one swift motion, and galloped off in a storm of dust. The ranchers lingered for a moment, then tipped their hats toward Elena. "We'll ride by again," Samuel said. "Keep eyes open." Cade nodded. When the others left, Elena leaned against the doorframe, her breathing shaky. "You said we were married." Cade looked at her, calm as ever. "That's the only thing I didn't lie about." The evening after Victor's visit hung heavy with dust and silence. Cade sat on the porch step, sharpening his knife, the motion slow and thoughtful. Elena leaned against the doorway, arms folded across her chest, watching him in the dim orange light. "I don't make a habit of lying," he said after a long pause, the scrape of steel against stone steady. "But when I said we were married, it felt more right than wrong." Elena stepped forward, her voice low. "The first time I heard Daniel call you Papa, I was afraid. Not for him. For me." Cade looked up. "I thought letting him love someone new would tear him apart if it ended," she continued. "But now I can't picture our lives without you." He said nothing, but he set the knife aside and stood. There was no proposal, no question, only a simple truth between them. The next morning, Cade hitched the wagon and drove Elena and Daniel into town. The chapel was small, wooden, weathered, with only 8 pews and a cross carved by hand. The priest, a quiet man with kind eyes, smiled when they entered. 3 townsfolk joined them: Samuel Ortiz, Miss Lucia from the Mercantile, and young Ben Harlow, who once traded Cade a lame colt for lumber. Elena wore a clean dress, pale yellow, faded. Daniel held her hand tight, hair combed back with water. Cade stood straight beside her, a man of few words and steady hands. When the priest asked if he took this woman, Cade answered with clarity, "I already do." When the question turned to Elena, she looked up at him and said softly, "I do, with all I have left." The vows were spoken, the Bible closed. There were no rings, just a shared look and hands held tightly. After the ceremony, Cade crouched beside Daniel outside the chapel. The boy looked up at him, blinking in the sunlight. "I know I'm not your blood," Cade said, "but from this day on, I aim to be more than that." He gently touched the boy's shoulder. "If it's all right with you, I'll call you son." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he threw his arms around Cade's neck. Cade held him close, eyes shut tight. That night, back at the ranch, Elena put Daniel to bed while Cade sat at the table. Firelight flickered over his face as he pulled out paper, dipped a pen into ink, and began to write. He wrote carefully, slowly, pressing each word down with quiet intention. "To the Honorable Clerk of the Court, this letter serves as sworn testimony that Elena Vaughn, now Elena Merrick, and her son Daniel reside lawfully under my roof and protection. As of June 28, 1872, Elena and I are married by witness and church. I claim full guardianship of Daniel Merrick as his legal father by marriage and intent, and stand ready to defend his rights and safety, by all means afforded to a citizen of this territory. He signed it in firm script, Cade T. Merrick. Then he folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it beside his rifle on the table. He didn't join Elena in bed that night. He sat by the fire, watching it burn low, keeping vigil not over fear, but over a promise made. Not with passion, with purpose. The sun rose earlier now, and the wind carried warmth instead of warnings. Green pushed through cracked earth like hope-breaking surface. The rain had softened the land enough for Cade to plant early corn, and for the first time in years, the fields no longer looked abandoned. A letter came mid-morning, delivered by Samuel's grandson. Cade read it on the porch, face unreadable, breath slow. The court had dismissed Victor Vaughn's claim. No legal grounds, no more questions. Cade Merrick was now the legal guardian of Daniel Merrick. No contest. He handed the letter to Elena without a word. She read it twice, then pressed her fingers to her lips, tears shining in her eyes. Daniel came running from the corral, waving a stick with a ribbon tied to the top. "What is it?" he asked, looking from Cade to Elena. Elena crouched beside him and took his hands gently. "It means," she whispered, "we're staying. No more running." Daniel turned to Cade. "Really?" He knelt down, brushing a hand over the boy's hair. "Really?" Daniel's face lit up. "Does that mean I get to keep learning my letters?" Cade chuckled. "We'll make a reader out of you yet." Daniel's reading lessons became a daily rhythm. Elena guided him through the alphabet each morning, and in the afternoons Cade sat beside him on the porch, pointing at carved letters on wood scraps. One morning, as Elena handed him a new reader, Daniel looked up and said, "You smile more now, Mama." Elena blinked. "Do I?" Daniel nodded. "You're the mama that smiles. That's what I tell the horses." Elena laughed, full and real. That night, after chores were done, Cade sat on the porch carving. He worked quietly into dusk, wood shavings clinging to his sleeves. The next morning, Elena stepped outside and saw what he'd hung over the gate. Merrick and family. No other words, no decoration, just truth. She stood there a long time, hand pressed to her chest. The harvest dinner came a few days later. Simple but full. Beans, roasted peppers, fresh bread Elena made from scratch. Daniel helped set the table with pride, folding napkins, placing a jar of desert marigolds in the center. They sat together at the table Cade's grandfather had built long ago. 3 people once broken, now somehow whole. Firelight flickered. Daniel bowed his head and said grace in his soft, sincere voice. Then he dug into his cornbread, grinning. As Cade passed a slice of bread to Elena, their hands brushed. She looked at him, then glanced around the adobe, the warm stove, the solid walls. Her son humming to himself with a full belly. She leaned in slightly, her voice low. "You know," she said, "our first meal together was dried meat under a rock overhang." Cade nodded. "I remember." Elena smiled. "Tonight we have food, a roof, and a name." She looked at him, eyes bright. "That day you gave me jerky. Today you gave me something better." He reached for her hand, fingers lacing through hers. "I gave you what was already yours," he said quietly. Her smile deepened, no longer uncertain. "Then I suppose it's mine to keep." The fire crackled. Outside, the corn rustled in the evening breeze, and under the new sign on the gate, the porch light burned soft, steady, and home. If this story moved your heart, even just a little, if it reminded you that love can rise from dust, danger, and the edge of despair, then you belong right here with us. Hit that like button to let us know you felt it. Tap subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another tale from the heart of the American frontier at Whispers from the West. Every story is carved from longing, loyalty, and the kind of love that defies the rules. So stay with us. There's more heartbreak, more healing, and more unforgettable romance waiting just around the bend, where bullets missed, but hearts didn't. Welcome home, partner.